The views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of Paranormal Buzz Radio or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is strictly prohibited. For information on everything Paranormal Buzz Radio has to offer, visit our website, paranormalbuzzradio.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Listener discretion is advised.
Listen in as your host, Casey Colburn, brings together a perfectly picked panel of guests to discuss hot topics and events within the metaphysical and paranormal field. But don't worry, should the discussions get too heated, our studio's witch will sound her cackle to simmer the cauldron back down. Listen for new episodes of Cauldron Talk with Casey Colburn every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. only on Paranormal Buzz Radio. Welcome to Cauldron Talk. This is Season 2, Episode 10. I'm your host, Casey Colburn, and today we welcome to the circle James Annitto and Carl Johnson. Today we are talking about demonology. Hello and welcome to my show. Before we begin, can you tell me a little about yourself?
Well, my name is Carl L. Johnson. To sum it up, I am a paranormal investigator who specializes as a demonologist. And that simply means I address some of the darker elements, some of the more malevolent situations that are brought to my attention. And sometimes that is through just communication online, a phone call. Other times it's actual intervention where I will go to see the person if they're reasonably within our proximity. That's me, and I think James will echo that somewhat.
Yeah, my name is James Annitto. As like Carl said, as himself, I am a paranormal investigator that specializes as a demonologist, but I also am as well a theologian. I have been ordained as a deacon. Basically have been investigating and researching the claims of the paranormal for 15 years, going on to 16 years. As Carl didn't disclose, 47 years.
Yes, Carl's a little bit older, slightly, and Carl has been at it for longer. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean I understand the field in a superior sense. It just means that I've been doing this longer because it's largely dealing with what could be considered the unknowable, and we're learning as we go along.
Most definitely. And that, which brings us, even though we are separate people with the same love and interest, but that's what makes, of course, Carl and myself, or I, as duo demonology, we are two demonologists that have to come together to, of course, explore and dive in and to legitimize the field of demonology.
Yes, which is strange. It sounds like a contradiction in terms to legitimize demonology since it has a ring of the supernatural. But that's really our mission, to bring it out of the cobwebs and dust of the Middle Ages and make it a viable discipline and study, bring it into the 21st century. It'll always have that eerie ring to it, being called demonology, but that's an overall blanket term for what we do and what our interest and avocation is.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool.
We think it is. It's cool.
So I have a couple of questions for you guys today. And my first question is, what is demonology?
I define in our duo demonology definition of demonology is the systematic study of the cultural traditions and lore of wicked spirits. So we're just, delving into the darker side of spiritualism and ghost hunting and, exploring the so-called supernatural. So that's what it is, systematic study of the lore and cultural traditions of wicked spirits, because it's not going to have a lot of scientific nomenclature and terminology applied to it. We're, demon hunting, but we're analyzing, and we also delve into the psychological aspects and ramifications of these situations. So we don't, necessarily buy into all these forces that actually spring from hell and, thriving in subterranean caverns, just waiting to spring forth. And it's very fanciful. And that's a Middle Ages concept and low Renaissance concept. But we're looking upon this as a real psychological faction and malady. That people do fear demons. They sometimes attribute their psychological neuroses or repressed traumas and unresolved conflicts, and will sometimes define that as a demonic attack. And often it's something much more intricate and psychological. But it can manifest as the demon and actually produce what we could call, in our Western culture, the demon.
Yeah, and demonology, to every extent, is, of course, part of many different civilizations and religious belief systems. There's many different forms of it. There's many different concepts of demons throughout many different cultures. But the form of demonology, of course, in the basis of Christianity, which, Carl and I both are a part of in some capacity as well. Of course, me being clergy. Carl, kind of Christian, as well. And, so we, in some forms, come at demonology on a full basis, but we, of course, have our pathways. And demonology, in that sense, comes, of course, from theology, which is the study of God, which in some forms could be a science. I believe it is a science, the science of understanding God. Saint Thomas Aquinas wrote the Summa, which is a very provocative and very thoughtful, creative book that makes you think about.
It's like a treatise on the subject.
It is. So, demonology actually doesn't just come from theology as its own branch. It actually comes from angelology, the study of angels, because in Christian belief, demons are fallen angels. So, demonology branches off of angelology. It's a very old study, that has been around probably since the Latin Vulgate, the first translation of Latin. But in many forms, it started to become more popular and adapted to the culture with a man named King James that wrote Demonology. I believe it was, 1560? Am I close there?
I think it's a little later.
A little later?
Close to the turn of the 17th century.
17th century?
Yeah.
But he wrote it very...
So that put it by 1597, 1598, around that time. We could get more precise dates.
But so demonology comes in more of the modern sense from King James, which everybody knows the King James version of the Bible. It, of course, helped adapt and made people literate in English, where they were able to speak, right? And, of course, read.
Knowledge was being disseminated more readily available to the populace.
Yes.
The Bible.
And, of course, King James had this kind of spearhead, and, of course, adapted throughout time. But demonology comes from those spectrums. And like Carl said, the medieval times and the Renaissance, there are a lot of ideological differences and methodologies that are different from then to now.
There's been some evolution, yeah. Although you could say that modern demonology had its onset in that time, very generalizing, around 1600. That ushered in demonology, and it hasn't changed all that much. But now there are innovations and all. So our mission as Duo Demonology is to modernize modern demonology. Take it that next step. That's something we can analyze and make use of.
It's so important, like Carl said. Neuroscience, psychology, parapsychology. So many studies within people, within the surroundings of us, within the universe. Even though we don't understand the afterlife or understand many other things, and there's so much more we can learn. We try to keep that process modernized. We try to equate. Of course, we are applied demonologists. So even though demonology is a study, and many people can study demonology, in fact, where it's an important tool to have an understanding knowledge in it. But we take that knowledge and we do it in an applied sense. So we physically take our knowledge that we've learned from either literature or working with other individuals, and we apply it in a field study, a field investigation with people that are supposed to be afflicted by these forces that are, of course, literaturized within many books.
Therefore, we have two avenues that we pursue: the academic demonology, which is the study and research, and applied demonology, which is intervention. So I told you ask a question, you're going to get a couple million words before we're done.
Hey, that works for me. I'm so excited to be talking to you guys today. I feel I'm going to be learning quite a lot.
Very glad to be here.
So before I ask the next question, I actually just thought of another one.
Okay.
So what is the difference between a daemon and a demon?
Again, it's nomenclature. It's the old way of saying demon would be daemon, spelled differently. That's why we adapted it.
Daimon or Daemon.
Yeah.
Usually AI. But
And that is a nod of acknowledgement and homage to the old system, when demonology did have its origins.
Mm-hmm.
Because this was during the so-called age of enlightenment. We like to think we're still in an age of enlightenment, but this is, post-Renaissance, when there was a new way of thinking being established. People were questioning more. And so that's just a nod to the King James parlance of that time, the Demonology.
Yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft was fond, the horror fiction writer, would spell demon with an A-E, the daemons.
And then the AI, of course, comes from Greek mythology, which demons in a Christian sense, and of course, you can quarter use the word in Hinduistic belief. I believe it's more the Rakshas, I believe, or Azora, which is more the bad evil force of Hinduism. But most cultures have a form of a demonic entity, but in the Christian sense. So, but yeah, no, a daemon was in Greek mythology this kind of middle being, this middle deity that would report back to the gods based upon basically the movements of human society. So if they were like deceiving the gods, they would report to the gods and say, oh, well, this person's kind of messing up. But in some forms, why daemon kind of transitions within the etymology to the word demon, especially, of course, with the translation from Greek or Latin to English, was that even though a daemon was a non-malevolent or benevolent entity, it was a neutral force. It could be malevolent or benevolent in its capacity of wanting to be. They were still deities, and some people equate that maybe the gods of Greek mythology were daemons.
But the daemons had important functions, like they were the celestial truant officers in that sense.
Kind of what angels are, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Angels being messengers.
Yeah.
Angelos.
So it makes sense that demons in Greek mythology, which a lot of course, the New Testament being written in Greek instead of Hebrew, like the Old Testament was. A lot of Greek mythology, a lot of Greek culture was influenced in Christianity, and you could see that. So,
very cool. Yeah. So, my next question for you is: what is a demonologist, and what exactly do you do?
Well, when people say demonologist, I think a lot of folks would have a concept that we are the ones who storm the house and we are called upon. We come in with our black robes and our crosses, cast out this evil spirit, rid this home, this domicile.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
Well, you have said that.
Yeah, I have many times.
But we can be that in that aspect if it's effective to the person we're trying to help. We can go through the drama of it, the trappings and all. But for the psychological impact of that, because sometimes nothing else will work. So, the demonologist is somebody, again, who explores the topic, the subject, but the demonologist will go a step further and actually look into this, the psychological aspects of what could be troubling somebody. And a lot of that comes out in the interview process, the initial interview process. And so, to be a demonologist, it's a multifaceted discipline. One has to be something of not really a clinical psychologist, but have some psychological, familiarity with the subject. And an angelologist, have to be a theologian to some degree. And of course, James is. So there's a lot to take into consideration when one is a demonologist. It's not so banal or simple as just having a faith and coming in with the cross and, like saying the spells and saying the prayers and throwing holy water. Oh, we usually do have some holy water with us.
Oh, of course, definitely.
Got to have some holy water with us in our satchels and all that. And our utility belts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Batman.
Yeah. But and some people equate that with being kind of a glamorous field. Demonology, because they've seen The Exorcist, and must be something like what we do.
They think we're an exorcist as well, which is, of course, a big misconception.
Right.
We can aid in that form. I like to say a demonologist is a mediator, because we are in the form, like Carl said, we dissect the case. We look at the preternatural possibilities. We look at the natural formalities to say if there's anything that can occur that is causing these issues, like a shared hallucination. And we are the mediator. If we feel like there are people to be that are experienced within like exorcisms, or if they truly do need a psychologist or a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, we lead toward them that way. Or if they have some sort of deficiency, maybe lead them towards a physician. Or we might be able to help them in a situation if there are supernatural forces at play. So that's, a demonologist basically does that, like Carl had stated. And, it's multifaceted. I've come across cases of the alien derivative, I believe. And so we've come across many different things. Carl dabbled in Bigfoot. I came across Bigfoot in my experience. So we're paranormal investigators. We dabble into so many things. Like Carl's a part of a group, Paranormal, with one of our members, Alicia Marco Carlson. So they're researching claims of those things. So as a demonologist, though, we are brought into more of the malevolent situations, the wicked spirits.
And we'll generally go in when we're called in after the initial paranormal investigation has been performed.
They've been frightened usually
by another team, and the people.
Usually misconceptions as well. So
right, so they want us to sort it out, and we'll come in and we'll perform our own paranormal evaluation and do a sweep of the home or whatever. And there's so much to consider, like is there electrostatic leakage? These people near power lines, they have faulty wiring in their house. That could be affecting them. Is there something that could be generating a mild hallucination? So much to think of. But particularly, what's in their background? What started this? What brought the demonic influence in, if that's what it is?
Yeah.
Did they have suppressed trauma, unresolved conflict, something's bugging them, something needs to get out, and it may be expressing themselves in more prosaic form.
Yeah.
And it may be
manifesting
as a demon. PK, which is psychokinetic activity, things moving about, raps on the walls. That could be caused by the subject, the turmoil that they are subconsciously expressing. To think about.
Yeah. So we do many things, and it's a very in-depth study. I think when people come across us and think that we're devil worshippers, and Carl,
devil worshippers,
Carl, but once was, and I think that people think of us in a different light, but in that same form, though, we study way above and beyond demonology. It's theology. It's so many forms, and that's what a demonologist is. A John Zaffis, a Ralph Sarchi, even a Nathaniel Gillis. So many people that have these titles are very well nurtured and formalized in many different religions, many different ideas and theories. And
we don't have as much trouble with social distancing as some lay people might, because once you say, if it comes up in conversation, you're a demonologist, people tend to give you your space.
Yeah.
What do you got with you? What are you, detachments? What are you?
Detachments.
They'll give you the table to yourself.
Yeah.
Demonologist here.
Demonologist here. Here's my badge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how does somebody become a demonologist?
Well, it starts with the desire to be that. Once somebody understands what is really meant by demonologist, they will find ways to study and pursue that field, that interest. It doesn't happen overnight. It's being mentored or finding somebody that can, you become their protege in demonology. It takes some research, like read some books on people who have experience in this field and have had such experiences. And who do you feel is your best example? Who would you like to emulate? What do you want to take out a notepad and write down what do you want to get out of demonology? And it tends to find you once you start pursuit of that field. then you'll meet the right people. It tends to fall into place. A lot of research and reading. I would never approach it like, there's a demon in there. Somebody has to save these people. We're going to challenge the demon. You might be yelling at the air for all you know.
Yeah.
And so there are sources. One good start would be if somebody wants to seriously pursue demonology as an avocation, as an interest. Contact us. Contact Duo Demonology. Mm-hmm. If we can't sufficiently help you, we'll point you in the right direction at least.
And Carl, I think a great point to lead into kind of a shameless plug. But, of course, read literature, like Carl said. But, Carl Johnson, of course, sitting next to me. People can't see that, of course. But
we are next to each other. We really are.
He wrote a book. It's called Shadow Realms Demonology Handbook, written by him and Liana J. Brock, who is also a theologian, accredited theologian. And so there's that book as well. So there are certain things that you can read. And, I think becoming a demonologist, isn't the thrill. Like Carl said, it basically discovers.
Unless you think it's thrilling to listen to like 6 hours of audio tape and.
But you were interested. We in some case were both interested in it.
Yes.
But it was life choices and life pathways that kind of led us to that directive. Like when I first met Carl, there's no demonology band camp. There's no real class you necessarily can go to. Yes, the Vatican Church has for priests and sometimes lay persons that want to do demonology courses. There are that. Most so for the formability of spiritual warfare teaching for people that are becoming exorcists, for priests that are becoming exorcists or training to become so.
Yes, and not every demonologist is an exorcist, but every exorcist is a demonologist.
And there aren't necessarily classes you can take, but there are people that offer these classes that have these respective roles or have these literatures, or people like Carl said, you can approach us. I think the best way to become a demonologist is to be mentored by somebody that is very well respected. Can't say accredited, but respected, and that has a illustrious career of dealing and working with paranormal phenomena and many different standards. So that's the best way to become a demonologist. Like for me, I met Carl 10 years ago, and little old me, I used to run a group, and then I was a tech manager because I was very good with computers, somewhat still decent, but I became Carl's tech manager of his group. And that really was the pathway. I worked with him. I learned from him. We would talk about it. We would have discussions. Then, of course, like Carl said, you work with other people and leads you to different people. And so, that's how you become a demonologist, but you can't get into it for the wrong reason, because if you do, it'll eventually kind of be a domino effect. It will unfold wrongly. It's not something you can get into and not have the care and the heart of respecting what you do or the people that you're dealing with, because, we come across people that were handling their lives, their livelihoods, their emotions, and like Carl said, there is dramatization. It's sometimes a psychodrama, and
yeah, if you understand what we're saying about that, sometimes the effects can, achieve the desired purpose. Yeah. If we come in overalls or something, or dress like we normally dress, sometimes people are not going to be too impressed by that. Yeah. But I can understand the impact of us coming in there and like you and your clerics, and you're dressed in basic black, and we're kind of ominous looking, and we have the knowledge with us, and say the right thing, so that's going to impress people.
Yeah.
Whereas really, we're just doing it to have that impact.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're not posing or pretending; we're just projecting that part of what we do. Mm. We'll come in with our satchels, our briefcases, and our equipment, and take some readings, and actually, talk to the people about what they are experiencing. If they want the demons chased out, we can make an effort to do that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So to let you know a little bit about me. So I'm an eclectic witch. I'm also I'm starting my path with shamanism as a Native American. And I always tell people all the time, my practice is never theatrical. It's just something very simple and like one and done type of thing, you know. It's not that there's anything wrong with doing the theatrical. It's how you present your intention. But I just don't always feel the need to do that, you know. Sometimes it is necessary for the intention, but not always.
Intention, yes.
Yeah.
What about on Halloween, though? I mean, Casey, do you dress up on Halloween? Do you look more witchy then?
I actually different things.
I bet you have some nice witch outfits. You know, I bet if the occasion calls for like a witch's ball or something, you know. But it's not your normal mode either, by any means.
No.
Dress,
it's not my charm either. So.
Yeah, I could just imagine the theatric with you, Casey. You just come in with a broom and some salt and start sweeping the house away.
Well, I didn't go that far. I just saw about it on Halloween.
What? That's a true ritual.
I bet
That's a true ritual.
I bet she has an expansive wardrobe that she just doesn't pull those things out every day. I'm interested in the shaman. That's totally lightly understood by paranormal researchers, but the shaman. You actually consult
with nature.
Yeah, you combine with the forces of nature, and you garner information from the substrate of what could be called the Akashic records. This containment of knowledge. And I'm assuming you do that and work with elements of nature, elements.
Yeah, it's working with not just nature but also spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now I'm actually learning from Chris Sutton, Coyote Chris Sutton.
I know. I'm very good friends with Chris.
Yeah, so I'll be starting shamanism with him. But I'm Seneca Iroquois, so I'm Native American. So my practice is already, it's eclectic in the way that it's always been more Native background than anything else. I do tend to tell people like I'm Wiccan just because it's easier than trying to explain everything, especially if I don't want to sit there and have a full conversation with them about it. But I mean the workings, like with both working with nature and stuff, that's very much, it's so similar to Wiccan that it's just easy just to say that.
Oh yes, it would be.
Very much so.
Because people tend to think in terms of definites and they want labels, so people would say to you, so what you're saying is you're a witch. You could put it that way, but you're not a witch. You are,
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't realize, too, with a lot of modern shamanism.
Depends on what you mean by
with
witch.
a lot of modern shamanism, too, is a lot of Native American folklore belief, of course, became so intertwined with Christianity. So there's a lot of pagan root, a Christian root within shamanism, which is, it's always fascinating. So I love it. I love Chris. I know a few shamans where, I went to some fun times with some tribes back in the day. Oh gosh, those are some trips. But yeah, I know a few shamans that did the old ritual of having to bear themselves to a tree for 3 days without eating or drinking water, and kind of ground with nature, and get to the brink of death with nature. And
I don't think I've ever been that dedicated.
well, that's the old shaman right for a lot of people, because you have to understand what it is like to come close to death to live. So it's like you're becoming one with nature. You basically, the ideology is a tree hugging. That's basically, So, but it's fascinating to me, like the determination, Chris being a great person. I love music, so drum vibrations. It's just fascinating stuff.
Well, it reminds me when I used to travel, I used to go to, I'm not sure they're still having this event, and I know they didn't this year, or last year.
What, powwow?
It's actually, that would be one aspect of, not a whole powwow, but it was Free Spirit Alliance put on the Free Spirit Festival in Bowie, Maryland, and I attended 6 of those.
Oh, nice.
And they would have the fire dance.
Oh, that was
Strange
awesome.
things would happen at night because you got people of a common mindset, paganistic proclivities.
Of course.
The big dance around the bonfire. I could actually, to a degree, influence or I don't know if I'll say control, but influence the flames. I could just by thinking of them make them well up.
Yeah, pyromancy there for a second.
Pyromancy, you could say.
Yeah.
I didn't even have an eye patch on, and I would make the flame go up, and people would say, "How do you do that?" We're dancing around it, and I would like gesture, and the flames would come up, or I'd suppress them, and magic things happen. It felt like magic.
Dude, you just created something for somebody. If you want to do this, if you when you listen to this and you hear this, people do fire ITC, like ITC devices,
Yes.
the ghost boxes, and of course there's recorders in some form. It's communication. Some people do it through like water vibration or fire, and the flames react.
Mm-hmm.
I could only imagine doing a fire IT session during a fire dance, and just seeing.
You'd be in the right atmosphere.
You would. Spirit would be there for sure, right? So, oh god, that'd be awesome. That's actually a fact. I wonder if anybody's ever done that. Attempted to do like fire ITC during a fire dance.
So it'd be worth an experiment. It'd be a fun experiment.
I know our next
there.
experiment. I'm gonna call my old powwow buddies.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard anybody do anything like that before. Yeah, but so I kind of forgot where I was going with the whole.
Oh, the conversation is so lively tonight.
It is. We like I said, we love this topic. We love the multi-diverse nature of it.
And I didn't want to present demonology as very clinical, though, and dry. It does have its moments of excitement,
of course,
fear sometimes, and enthrallment. Yeah, it will. It's interesting. But if I were to tell you about most of my experiences with demonology, I could encapsulate it and give you a real slam bang half hour. Like, wow, this is fascinating. No wonder you do this. But most of it is like a lot of research and waiting for something to occur, waiting to hear about the big case or something relevant. So it's.
And then of course, you excuse my French, even though it's not French. Like there are oh shit moments, and those are life altering, depending on how you take it as well. They really are. It could detract you or. And
you gotta do those moments,
but you gotta prosper, and
You want to make demonology sound really enthralling. To talk about your oh shit moments for give them a half hour of that, and wow, what kind of experiences? I'm surprised you do this. Wow, it does have its moments. Of course it does.
Of course,
it's a different kind of pursuit.
It is.
Sure.
Yeah. So how dangerous is it for someone, and what kind of precautions do you have to take? I imagine there is some like mental precautions too you have to do to go into this sort of thing.
I think the biggest thing to guard against is, besides watching your footing, if you're going to dark rooms and all that, is to make sure you're not going to run out of the room at, a stressful moment. Because if you do, if you're scared off of the site, you might not be able to go back again. You might not want to.
Yeah.
Like, again, we're dealing with the unknown, and what's really scary about ghosts and demons is the element of the unexpected. Like if you turn around and see a shadow form to your side,
lurking right there.
How long have you been here? Or something like a glass shatters and breaks, or somebody gets taken over. All of which I've seen. Then you've got to make a prior commitment that you are not going to be driven out, because that's not going to inspire confidence in the people you're trying to help or in your own self. So make that prior resolution that you will not be driven from the site. I say this because my first bona fide demonic situation or case, a long time ago, I almost did leave. It's like, this is not something I'm familiar with. This is unwholesome. I just don't feel good about it. If I go back to my parents' house, they're going to have food in the refrigerator. Just don't want to deal with this right now. But another part of me is saying, this is pivotal to me. Am I going to stick with it? No matter what happens. Some scary things are happening. People are acting strange. Am I going to stay? And I did. And I was of help. That was actually successfully resolved. So I'm glad I did. That was kind of my testing ground, even though it was a practical. So, just make sure you're going to do your purpose. You're going to take every precaution, like realize that things could get hairy and scary. But you're not going to be, if you see something untoward or something really unexpected, you're not going to leave.
Yeah.
Unless under extreme circumstances, like a person, the subject is becoming really violent, they feel they're taken over. But as far as anything like you hear the footsteps or hear the raps on the walls or all that PK activity we hear about, you're not going to leave.
Yeah.
You're not going to be driven away.
Yeah, there's dangers, of course, one of the things that we've said a few times is, we work with people and document situations, and anytime you deal with an individual and everybody's different, everybody has a different personality. There's 7+ billion people and every single one of those people are different. So that's a whole nother reality of it. It's a whole nother dynamic that you don't expect. Yes, we have case experiences, but every case is different because there's another person involved that's different. So, that's a danger. But I think really the biggest thing, too, is what most psychologists or people in the psychology field call transference. I think that is a big danger, too, because I think a lot of people have the intent to go in there and help these people or guide these people to be helped so they can help themselves. But, sometimes, of course, early in the lives of getting into demonology, Carl and I have gotten a hell of a lot better at it. Sometimes we feel bad when we have to kind of step away from a situation.
Which we've had recently without going into detail.
Most recently, yeah. And, transference is bad because if you try to be emotionally involved, you take a lot of what you're involved in and bring it home with you. It's not even attachments. Everybody wants to jump to attachments, but it's transference. It's kind of attaching to the situation, taking their emotions with you, letting it affect your constant consciousness. And that is a danger because you really can't get emotionally attached to these situations. Yes, you can become friends and acquaintances with these people, and you can have care and want to help these children or people that are living there, but you also have to have a separation. And I think a lot of people that get into demonology try to apply it in the field study. They don't understand, they're dealing with people, and this is not like just going into an abandoned building or a house and saying, "Hey, Rick, are you here? Are you with us? Can you give us one knock?" It's not like that, It's a whole nother reality, and that's the dangers of it. Dealing with the people, saying the wrong thing, jumping to a conclusion, and basically affecting these people in the long term. I think that's a danger. It's the danger on yourself because it's liability. It could affect you physically, financially, mentally, and same for the homeowner as well, So there's a lot of dangers, but there are some of the key ones, the top ones.
Yeah. By the way, I violated my own rules about that. Sometimes I stayed with the situation when I would have recommended somebody else leave.
I have too, yeah.
Because I wanted to see it out. I'm not going to learn anything and not be of help if I don't. That was when, that case in Oklahoma that I had with Mike Ricksecker.
Yeah.
We didn't know what was going to happen minute to minute.
That was
that was successfully resolved. I'm not saying everything was perfect, but we did achieve what we set out to do.
Well, a lot of times they are and can be, but sometimes, unfortunately, they can't be resolved. And
well, I know cases where they're not able to help.
Yeah, most definitely. And sometimes, of course, people don't realize there's the spiritual warfare, which is, of course, the difficulty because you're dealing with forces that we do really truly don't comprehend.
I would say we've always been of help. We have been of help.
Oh, yeah,
it's just we can't
definitely
cure it.
Yeah, we can't cure. We've been an aid. We've made them feel better. But yeah, sometimes we haven't been able to be the elixir that the people wanted.
So how common is a demonic haunting? I too work in the paranormal field, and it seems like every place I go to, somebody's always saying it's a demon.
That's what you hear more so lately. But it actually is a rarity where, we came up with a basic figure of how many bona fide demonic cases that
you can't beat statistics.
And I have. And out of all the years I've been in, I believe there were 5 where I really thought this is what I could call demonic.
Yeah.
I can give a good supportive argument as to why this was demonic. So for me, 5 in all those years.
And then guess what? For me, in almost 16 years, 5. So that in 63 years, that is 10 cases of possible demonic activity. Where, of course, a few of those out of the 10 were of demonic possession, where clinical psychologists were involved in some form.
Mm-hmm.
So 10, yeah.
10 between us.
It's not a lot, so it is rare. It's not like you see in the movies. It's not like you see on television. Carl and I have had the pleasure, both being in this field and, being lecturers and speaking on this topic. We've had the pleasure, and we thank everybody that has allowed us to speak as dual demonology or as individuals on this topic throughout time. We've been able to go to a lot of these places that have been deemed demonic, evil, and I don't like to talk bad about people or places, but I've never ever thought that feeling, and I've been truly staring at an individual that's been possessed. I've been in infestation, oppression. I've been in high-level poltergeist cases, as Carl has, and I never felt that atmospheric, that trembling, that fight, fright, or flight kick in at all in these places. And the places that have dealt with this demonic force, regardless if they're, of course, manipulative, they're deceptive, in many forms they can still be felt.
You're talking about these evil influences.
Yeah, you can feel the difference within the atmosphere, even if you're not of claimed sensitivity. And I've never felt these at these places. Some of these places, like a lot of people think the Conjuring House is evil. Carl.
It's very relative and interpretative.
But it's dependent on the person, on the intention of going there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that has a lot to play with these places. And, I think what we are as people, a lot of people don't understand is we're the battery when it comes to a haunting, to a situation. So how we reflect upon it, how we act, also could be how it's reciprocated, replicated to us in form. And demons are rare. And any time that we've come across a demonic case, maybe you can elaborate more on that. There's always been a traumatic experience involved.
Always, yes. But I've had to tell people that we were in which we were intervening in their situation. I said, after getting to know them, knowing the family's history, I would say, the supposed supernatural projections here, what you're experiencing, the haunting, the PK activity, what seems to be demonic, that is more a symptom than the cause of your problems. That's how it's manifesting. It's like, that's an overt symbol or demonstration of what the family unit is experiencing as a problem. Some of them I said, I'd be surprised if you didn't have some paranormal activity going on in your household, because that's how it's manifesting. That's the house screaming at you in a way. There are other things to deal with. But a lot of people take that approach like, oh, if you just you're the experts, get the demon away. Well, we don't say it's a demon. But get the spirit out of our house and everything will be hunky-dory. It's really not. So it becomes quite complex, but fascinating. You become, involved in people's lives and get to know them and like where their situation started. Often very complex.
Mm-hmm. So have you had a paranormal experience or a demonic experience that has really stuck with you?
Yes.
Yes, most
all of them that were demonic have, yes. I would say my first one, which was back in 1980, and I was just getting into paranormal investigation, but demonology found me. It's not something I started off pursuing, but it all began with what was happening. It was my first, preternatural encounter, but there was a family residing in the west end of Providence, Rhode Island, and they had their son, as a 14-year-old boy at the time, was being taken over by an invasive personality. Something would make him act fluey. When he would go into these fits, before I'd seen them, I thought probably he has some kind of dissociative personality disorder. He's maybe combined with epilepsy, and it makes him appear that he's being taken over by some kind of demon. And so that's what I expected to encounter, but it was horrific. what was happening with this boy. His body was being flung about the room. I mean, he was virtually levitating. He was like thrown about. Objects in the house, like especially religious icons, like a picture of Jesus on the wall, a crucifix on the wall, would fly off the wall when he was being taken over. I was invited to spend the night to observe him, and it was his, bedroom was adjacent to where the sofa upon which I was reclining. I was just nodding off. It's about 1 a.m. All of a sudden, I was awakened by this blood-curdling scream. It sounded like someone being flayed alive. And I realized it was the boy. So I get up off the sofa and fumbling for the wall switch, turn on the light. And just as I turn on the light, just in time, his bedroom door flung open, on its own, it seemed, propelled by some invisible force. And his body sailed out of that room, spinning about the floor, being thrown. It seemed like invisible hands were tossing him. And I stood transfixed. I mean, what am I going to say or do? And he did a backwards flip and landed on the sofa where I was resting. And this deep guttural laugh issued from his throat. And he looked at me. It was like looking into the face of hell. For the life of me, it seemed as if his gums had receded, his teeth had elongated. He had this wild look in his eyes. And at this point, other family members had come into the room, because they heard the screaming. And the boy leapt at me. This is slender guy, 14. And I was my normal 200 pounds. And I tried to restrain him as gently as I could, but forcefully. And he pushed me right off. And then he came out of this fit and was sobbing and weeping. He was panicky. And that's what had been going on. So I and the family members we had to develop some strategy, and we arranged an expulsion, which is something of a minor form of exorcism. And that was a horrendous ordeal, but it succeeded. I remember when it started, we were seated in a semicircle around this boy, and he had a makeshift altar set up, and prayers were offered. Well, the floor shook. It's as though the house groaned. Mm. And this was the same, with his house where he lived, but down on the first floor. And then it became eerily silent in that room. And my chair, with me in it, slid back across the floor against the wall. And, I hardly had a chance to be startled before I realized that my chair's going back with me in it. And he fell to the floor, went through his gyrations, and that's when I wanted to leave. So this is not right for me. I don't know how I can help these people. I don't know why they think I can. But that other side of me kicked in, and I stood my ground. And one time as the boy was approaching me, very menacingly, vampiric he looked. He's stalking up to me. Yeah, it was hairy. I just held up my right hand, and said, "Stop." Not knowing why I did it, I said, "Stop," and he did. And I went up to him and I put my hands on his shoulders reassuringly. And then we asked for a sign. Give us a sign that you're departing, wicked spirit. Well, right then, I don't know if it was coincidence or not, but the blinds fell down. Ding, ding, ding. So, okay, there's our sign. Oh, quite an episode. This is over an hour it went on, but it succeeded. He was all right after that. Of course, I'm sure he was convinced that I could help him and that this ceremony would help him. But nonetheless, it was quite an ordeal. Mm. And one of the most freaky things that happened, it may not seem like the scariest, but there was a picture of Jesus on a table. I just happened to glance at it because I wondered if the boy was looking at it. And I looked at it again a minute later. That picture was upside down. Mm. What an eerie thought that when I was standing next to it and wasn't looking, boom, it must have flipped itself. Mm. All kinds of hairy things going on there. But that's what started my interest in demonology.
Yeah, it's very fascinating.
My passion for it, might say.
Yeah. I would say my case would be my first as well. I would say this is almost 9 years ago. I did not really necessarily believe in demons. Of course, I understood and knew the background and was well versed even at that point. Of course, I've come a lot further now and studied and understanding many more different sciences and theories within theology and demonology in the paranormal field and understanding more natural occurrences. But my first case, I didn't believe in demons. I really did not, to be honest with you. But I was brought onto, and of course I have to be very well-natured of what I say because I did sign an NDA. But
non-disclosure agreement.
A psychologist actually brought me in onto this case, and this was in Salem, Massachusetts, about 9 years ago. And it was a case that I would say that has followed me to this day. I'm not very well with remembering people's names. I'm more of a face person. I recognize by face more than name. But this is somebody that I will always remember their name to the day I die. It will be an experience that I have replayed time to time when I think about it. And it's something I'm very forgetful in a lot of things. So to remember it from start to finish, every so often, I wouldn't say haunt me is the word, but to remind me that there's experiences you need to observe to open your eyes. And, being involved that I've seen the triangulation, I've seen the strength beyond adrenaline. I have rosaries that were touched by this afflicted individual that has this metal that has kind of discoloration, kind of like oxidation, but this metal doesn't oxidize. It's not copper. So like there's oxidization where the afflicted individual touched the rosaries and broke these rosaries through a table. The eyes, of course, did fully go black with triangulation of the face where the cheekbones pinnacleized, turned into like a pyramid, pointed out. And then, of course, very tone changes. The tone changes could have been more psychological. There was psychological and trauma involved. Of course, the psychologist knew this, but they felt and experienced other things there where my services were required to be brought in because, of course, being a demonologist, I still never came across a demon, but is very well natured in it. I didn't have much field study at that time with dealing with the real demonic experience. I've had a lot of paranormal investigations and things that I feel like I never came across a demon, never dealt with somebody that was possessed. But this was a time where I was dealing with somebody in a transient possessed state. And it was just very eye-opening. Of course, like Carl's situation, there was ritual done. But it was done that night in an emergency situation because, he triggered. He went into his, transient state and whatever was afflicting him, or if it was himself afflicting himself with this construct he created, it had taken over. That personality had taken over. So I, of course, at that point, as deliverance minister through the Church of Christ at that time frame, I had performed a deliverance over this individual. And that was very eye-opening. Our sign, there was a sign, he vomited. So there was an expulsion of fluids from this individual. But one of the things that really was eye-opening, that really made me believe that I dealt with something, what we can call a demon in some form or nature, was the after effects of this case. All of us were friends, the people that were involved in this case, the people that were physically there, that weren't physically there that night, but were involved in some form or nature in previous situations of investigating that house. We all went at each other's throats. Friendship fell apart, and that was the biggest actually eye opener for me because when you read about demonology and people that have been involved within it as a demonologist or an exorcist, you hear about the repercussions, the ramifications that happen in their personal life, and that it was ramification. I do believe that happened from dabbling and trying to be an effective mediator and helper in that case, and there was a lot of blowback. And that was my first case. I would say it was definitely my most eye-opening, my most harrowing.
That's what stuck with you.
Stuck with me. Of course, like Carl, experienced many other different things after that that were as scary or eye-opening. But of course, the first one, I think, when you usher upon actually experiencing evil in some form of nature, either if it's constructed by a human or the true demonic being of its own non-corporeal sense. I think it's still eye-opening. It's still scary. You feel your bones tingling. You feel your solar plex region.
You feel it's a physical, palpable sensation.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You're experiencing that on a very physical level as well as emotional.
Definitely. There's so much going on.
That makes you want to come, Casey, to our next demonic situation. You want to be our guest and observe, don't you?
Absolutely not.
At least you're honest.
That's the correct answer.
Yes, that's what we'd like to hear.
Mm-hmm. No, I work with enough weird things. I don't need too much more.
On your own cache.
Weird. To be honest with you though, is I've always heard people, and I've never taken this as a James Randi test, $1 million test of your ability, but I have taken people on cases where I, of course, did the interview process. I kind of not physically been there, but kind of formulated kind of a possibility of what was going on based upon being involved in situations with similar characteristics. And I brought people on with me knowing there could be some sort of involvement of some negative nature, if it was influenced by the individual being negative or some sort of unseeable force being there as negative. And I've taken people on cases with me where I want to quote it to be demonic, qualify it to be demonic. And some of these people trembled in these situations. And I don't talk about these people to be mean of them, but those cases are tough. There are a lot of people that can't handle that stuff. And, a demonic case is so much more, it's like a jigsaw puzzle compared to a regular puzzle. And there's just so many moving pieces. And, a lot of people want to see a demon to believe it, but I didn't want to see it to believe it. I was just dragged into that situation. I was cool. I was cool never actually dealing with a demon, just studying it. And then I came across it, and I understand and realize, the proportions of how difficult it is and how life influencing it is. So. It's just a crazy field. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got a lot of people in the field that, they'll ask spirit to make a noise or, touch them. And then as soon as it, complies and does what they ask, they hightail it out of there. So, yeah, I can see a lot of people saying they want to see those things and then in the last second, being very apprehensive about it. Personally, I just would need to know more. I'm one of those, you have to know what you're doing before you just do it. And so, because I don't really have any background working with demons and things like that, I would have to say no until I know a little bit more, at least.
Yeah, it's hard to work with demons. They're not very cooperative anyway.
And I think for some people too, I think even if it's not just possession, I think when people even go in a trance, like a channeling state, I think when people come across that and experience that, it's startling for a lot of people, and it's basically a dude run moment.
Yes,
that shouldn't happen when you're in that situation.
I have to wonder if there are some demons that really don't resent us and aren't that bad fellows. We just don't hear from them if they are. Maybe as a quasi species, maybe these beings aren't all malevolent towards human beings. Maybe there's a Hellboy out there. Maybe they're not. Maybe there's a whole strata of these non-corporeal beings that you could classify as demons. They just don't have anything against us. We don't hear from them. Why would we?
Definitely.
Yeah. Maybe they're not all interested in us. Some of them are.
Yeah. So lastly, do you guys have any advice for our listeners that may be interested in learning more?
Stay away!
It
that
sounds like Ebenezer Scrooge right there, like one of the ghosts.
how about Jacob Marley?
Scrooge!
I'm here to warn you that you still have a chance of escaping my fate. I would tell people this, like do your research, do your homework, talk to the right people. Don't jump into it and don't have a preconception of what the demon is, because we really don't know. I'm finding out the more that I don't know about these things. They just seem to exist. I think they are, they gestate within the human mind and they become projections, whatever their source. And then they can live on after the people who produce them. That's a very,
and sometimes even take
very mundane
over
interpretation. That. Yes, that has been known to happen. So don't just jump into anything. Observe first. That's how I did. Then eventually, of course, as you were, James, I was thrown into that kind of situation. Yeah. But I didn't anticipate that. So just, talk to people who have been in the field, who have experienced these things. You're going to find different kinds of stories. One demonologist's perspective is not going to be like another's necessarily. We do try to agree on some common ground. Like I have an identical twin brother, Keith Johnson.
He's a demonologist too.
We work well together, but he would have different interpretations of origins. Of what is a demon?
Yeah, he does not communicate to spirit.
Right. He won't speak to spirits like he used to as a paranormal investigator. He feels like they're being very deceptive. Yeah.
But my advice for people would be almost like the same flow as Carl. Seek guidance. Be open-minded. Don't allow your opinion to outweigh the fact, the empirical. It's great to have your own opinion. Everybody has them, but there is data out there. There's things that you can look at before you jump to the conclusion that it's something. Carl and I do our best, like he said, never to conclude, but we speculate. Maybe come up with a resolution,
a strategy,
a game plan. Work at it, of course. So there's just so much to do. Be well versed. Look at many different religions, even if you're Christian or you're Jewish or you're Islamic or Hindu or Shinto or
how about atheist? That's more
agnostic.
Agnostic. That's more of a challenge.
But still, study all different religions, beliefs. Study anthropology, psychology. Get well versed in all possible. Of course, you might not master all of them, but at least you can be a jack of all trades and combine it to be a valiant effort to aiding and assisting people. And that's my word of advice. And reach out. Don't hesitate if you want to do this. Don't hesitate to reach out to Carl and I or other individuals. You might get turned down by some people, but don't take that as a detractor. Take that as a lesson. Just if you really want to do this, keep on trucking along, and if it's meant to be, you'll make it happen.
And read Shadow Realm's Demonology Handbook. I know the audience can't see it. If you read these 300 pages, you'll be a demonologist at the end of that. No, I'm kidding. It's not the definitive work on demonology, but it gives two personal perspectives on the topic in some case, in essay form and in case histories. And do look up our website, demonology.org. It's www.demonology, spelled the modern way, DEMONOLGY, demonology.org. You find our website, which is still being developed. We're expanding it.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for being on my show. I appreciate it.
Just shot by. You said conversational. We conversated.
Yes, it was definitely a really interesting one. And I'm so excited to get it out to everybody. So thank you guys.
So you don't come on a demonic case. Okay. You give it some thought, then get back to us.
Okay. Maybe after a little bit. I am apprenticing under Brian Cano, so that might help.
Yes, Brian Cano, yes. Our good friend, yes, and colleague. Saw him just about a month ago, Brian.
I'm going to text him right now.
Yeah. Hi, Brian. Yeah. You tell him we all say hi here.
Okay.
Back to the Rhode Island home front.
Yeah, so hopefully after I learn a little bit more, I'll be more prepared to talk with you guys.
Hey, and we'd love to be on, expound a little bit more upon demonology. It's so intricate. Of course, We also, a shameless plug for people that don't just want to go to the website.
We have no shame.
We also, we have no shame. But we also have we try to have a weekly podcast every Thursday. We just had one last night on Wednesday with Lloyd Arbach. But we usually have a podcast where we talk about specific topics, more so within the demonology realm of things. But, of course, we do branch out as well. But that's also a medium that people hear.
Yeah, and we are aided and facilitated by Elise Gianmarco Carlson, as James mentioned earlier. She is our manager of Demonology, and she is also the director of Panorama Paranormal. And as the name implies, panoramic and a wide array of interests. It can be discrepancies in the historic timelines. It can be cryptozoology. Although we don't find a lot of strange life forms out there to research. But every once in a while, you hear about a Bigfoot or Chupacabra. I haven't investigated Chupacabra, but I think that's been pretty much substantiated to be a real creature. So we'll delve into all those things with Panorama Paranormal. And, of course, very much in association with Duo Demonology. Elise is our manager of Duo Demonology. And she's
our historian,
historian, yes, she is an excellent historian. She heads the Johnston Historical Society in Johnston. Yeah, president of the Johnston Historical Society in Johnston, Rhode Island. So we can't say enough good things about Elise. Well, we really can't because we're running out of time.
Yes, we are.
Otherwise we would.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Casey. Opportunity. We'll talk to you again, Casey.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you for joining my circle tonight. It was a pleasure to discuss this spooky topic with you. And a thank you to all my listeners for tuning in. And as always, dreadful dreams. Remember, my darlings, to always be kind to those around you, including our friends with claws, fangs, and fur. Hello, darling. Love the show and want to be more involved? All while showing your support? Have I got the perfect thing for you? Subscribe to my Patreon page today, and as a patron, you'll have the option to select which tier you are interested in, with exclusive patron-only offers from early access, live stream chats, shoutouts, distant readings, and so much more. If this has piqued your interest, please follow the link in the chat or go to patreon.com and search Cauldron Talk with Casey Colburn and become a patron today. Thank you for your support, darlings, and as always, dreadful dreams.